is there certain investments that you look at that maybe you'd say, if I were to look at somebody who was a millennial versus someone who's a Gen Xer versus someone who's a baby boomer, yeah, depending on the phase of life that you're in, are there certain buckets that they would fit into relative to the type of investments they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at investing, we would prefer that whatever we're investing in, we have some sort of a strategic advantage in. And that could be knowledge, it could be skill set, it could be people that we know. And millennials, stereotypically, are pretty good with social media. So they're going to have insight into what emerging platforms we should pay attention to. So it might be as practical as there's a social media site right now called Twitch, which is emerging and capturing a lot of market share.
Yeah, my son's on it.
Okay, there you go. So if you have a young person who is on the cutting edge of that trend, have them double down on that because they have a strategic advantage over someone who is in an older generation.
Right.
So it's going to take you and me a little bit longer to figure out a brand new social platform than either of our children.
Right.
And they're going to have a little bit of a strategic advantage there. Have them go all in on that. Whereas somebody who is older has the benefit of time and experience. We've seen market cycles. We've seen ups and downs. Whereas right now, millennials have lived through only boom times in the last 15 years. Yeah. So what is going to happen when the market has its next pullback? They're probably going to freak out. They're going to overcorrect, oversell. They're going to run for security because they've never had to see it before. Right. But if you're an older person and you've seen ups and downs and you've got some in the bank and you're good, that's a good time to have dry powder to be able to buy up assets. They're going to be incredibly undervalued when we have the next pullback. So where do you have a strategic advantage? Do you have relationships that you can bring to a new investment? So for example, I privately only invest in physical products brands. And the reason for that is because I've made all of my money in physical products brands. I have connections to people in retail. I have connections to influencers who can help incubate a company. I have access to investors who know that that's my skill set and they're throwing money at me. It would be really silly for me to try and pick the next cryptocurrency because I have no strategic advantage there. Now, I have invested in cryptocurrency, as we've discussed, partially to keep myself sharp, even though I don't believe in it as an asset sector, except for one exception. I did invest in one emerging ICO, one cryptocurrency that was brought to me by a personal friend of mine who, as far as I know, is the most connected person in the cryptocurrency space, and he specializes in ICOs and raising money for ones that he personally backs, that he personally invests in, that he personally vets the team and says, these are guys that I believe in. Now, I am not betting on that cryptocurrency. I'm betting on a relationship. In the same way, I have investors who invest in me because they're investing in my knowledge and my strategic advantage. So we've all got some sort of strategic advantage, either with people we know, with assets we have, with connections or experience or time. And I would say depending on what those are, and that's going to largely be determined by your age and experience, that's where you should start looking at where you should invest.
To that point, when you're doing capital raises, I mean, when I was out raising money for one of our ventures, and I'd get in front of the private equity guys, I asked them all the same question, which was, what's the number one thing you look for in an investment? And 100% of the time they said the team. It's the who. Not, is this a great idea? Of course they have to like the idea, but it's who the person is or who the team is that's going to bring this into reality. So I think you're making a really, really good point here.
I like to say that the answer to almost everything is who.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we think about experiences that made us happy, usually we're thinking about who it was with.
Right.
You can be in the most beautiful place in the world and be around people you don't like, and it's not a good experience.
Right.
Whereas you could be in a small, tiny, rundown dorm room and have the best time ever because you're with your best friends.
Right.
And almost everything comes down to who. Success comes down to who. Investments come down to who. Happiness, love, they all come down to who, not what, not how. those things can be helpful.
Yep.
When can be helpful, but who is ultimately the determining factor.
Yeah, and you talk about the arc of experience, seeing cycles, et cetera. I could tell you when I look back and say, okay, what mistakes did I make over the years, more to the point of the who, was taking opportunity over values. I'd look at certain people I want to put money into or create a partnership with, and it was such a great opportunity, but there wasn't a values match between us. And even the product is a values match. In other words, you're investing in something that's contradictory to your own values. That also can lead to some kind of a problem for you. So I think that's really wise investing advice for people that are out there.
And I have almost the exact same experience.
Yeah. It's not fun, and you want to learn after a while so you don't repeat that one. So in your experience, what is the timeline expectation or range of timelines to go from I'm starting to getting 1,000 people to follow
90
me?
days.
You said that so quickly that there's more of a formula here than I might understand.
Well,
So take me into it.
it's just experience based on if you're really in it and going for it, it'll probably take you 30 days to have a message hit. One piece of content that impacts enough people, assuming that you are then going to ride that and interact with all of the feedback that comes from that. So if you put out a different message, a different tip, a different strategy, a different piece of advice, a different video, one of them usually stands out and creates 80% of that audience. It's then your job to spend the next 60 days to take that message to as many people as possible. So if I look at all the videos that I've created, I could point to less than 10 that have probably attracted 80% of the business, 80% of the eyeballs, 80% of the attention, 80% of the PR that I've received over the last 10 years as an entrepreneur. I could also pick out 5 podcasts, 5 blog posts, 5 Facebook posts. And what I'll do is when I see something hit, when I know I've got something, if something gets more shares, more likes, more emails, or even better people responding, my ideal people to work with responding to it, I then take that post and I turn it into a video. I then turn that video and we turn it into a blog post. We then turn that blog post, we turn it into a podcast. That same message is going to be distributed to as many people as possible. And what will happen at that point is then we can take that message and roll it out to other podcasts, other YouTube channels, other blogs. So just today, this morning, one of my mentors who has a huge audience noticed that I had tipped my cap to him in one of my videos. And I shared on video a lesson that he had taught me. And he shared that with his audience, right? And so someone else saw that and they clicked the share button. And someone saw that and they clicked the share button. Or one time I had a Facebook post go semi-viral, probably got 100 shares on Facebook or so. And the people who were sharing it were not the people who would usually share my content. They were much higher level individuals. So I was connecting with a really, really good market. So we turned that into a video. It's the most viral video I've ever done.
Wow.
We then took that and we turned it into a podcast, released it on a podcast. And what I noticed was that several other podcasts bigger than mine who had started tuning into my podcast based on one of the other pieces of content I had put out, they took the podcast episode, sent me a message, said, could we share this on our podcast? And so that one message, which was a 6-minute message, started building my audience, doing it one time to many, many people. So a lot of new entrepreneurs will assume that building an audience comes down to putting out as much as possible. And that's true until you find your points that are connecting. Then you go scale those with more media. You go scale those with more relationships. You scale that by distributing it as much as possible. 1,000 people happens as a result in 90 days.
So if you're somebody that says, well, geez, I don't know how to put up all this stuff and to get it implemented. I have something to say, but I don't know how to set up a blog. I'm not sure how to go and
Then
market
don't.
it. So if you can't do it yourself, what should you do?
Either figure it out or choose something that you do understand.
Okay.
And if you're not willing to figure it out, just don't do it. Like seriously, just don't do it. Your message isn't important enough for you. You should pursue another route.
Right.
You should go be an investor, or you should start a business that you do understand. So you have to understand enough to be able to evaluate those results. Otherwise, you're just wasting money. And you probably, whatever you're thinking about doing probably isn't that important to you.
So now we're talking about content. My other question was, I have content, but I don't know how to program a page. I don't know how to set up opt-ins. I don't know how to, what list management do I use, et cetera. These are a lot of just the fundamentals that people really need to understand. Your advice is go to work and study it and figure it out and then go once you do, or don't bother. Now you're saying, okay, well, I'm trying to figure out content. You said just open up your phone. So where were you going with that particular idea?
So once again, we're talking about building audiences, right? And I think building audiences is a superpower to have that first side thing that produces thousands of dollars a month, or your first $1 million, or gives you the acceleration point to sell a product.
Right.
And so that's the context with which we're talking. I don't think it's 100% necessary that everybody is producing videos on the internet. I don't even think it's necessary per se to do this in order to build a business. I do think it's necessary for there to be some sort of audience in order to make any product hit. Now, it doesn't have to be you being the face of it. It could be videos that someone else makes and you're testing different messages. It could even be just sponsoring other people's audiences. For example, if you didn't want your company or you as a person to do any content distribution at all, just go pay the people who are doing it to adjust their message to talk about you.
Right.
And that's called influencer marketing. And the ROI on that is absurd when done well and very poor when done poorly. But if you have people who are aligned with your values, your mission, and your products, it can be very, very lucrative in a way to put a business or a message or product on the map. Now, if you are going to be that person that is distributing a message, it's your job to experiment with what messages hit. And everybody hates it at the beginning. Everybody. I'll tell you a quick story. I was on a plane preparing to give a keynote, and I opened up my laptop to work on the keynote, and my internal noise said, man, who wants to listen to me talk about business and entrepreneurship? And I was talking about what we're talking about right now, and I felt like I had nothing to add to this crowd. And all of a sudden, my internal noise started to come in. And so I said, okay, well, that's interesting. I guess I'll start with that. And so I went on stage and I said, I opened up my laptop to share this with you. And I felt like I had nothing to share because we are all battling this internal voice in our head that says we're not good enough, that says we have nothing to share.
Right.
And I just want you to know that it's easy for you to sit in the crowd and look at the people on stage like they have some sort of special ability, and I don't. I'm just a normal guy who figured out a few habits that created some success for me. And at no point do I want you to put me on a pedestal just because I'm a few feet above you and I'm delivering this because I feel like I'm one of you, and I've been sitting in the crowd many times, idolizing the people on stage, not knowing that they had their insecurities too. So you're gonna feel that come up when I'm sharing what worked for me. And I want you to know that you're just as good as me. I'm just maybe a year ahead in terms of my skill set. With that, let's start going.
Yeah.
And it was the best part, the most well-received part of the entire keynote. It was because all of a sudden, it was a feeling that we gave to them of a freedom and an ease around permission of feeling inadequate. And when I just connected in that way and shared what was exactly on my mind, that connected with the rest of the audience.